fellow female activists. Cathy here, your wellness coach and fellow female activists. We are here. This is an extra. And today we're talking about basically how 1/3 of all hospitals are actually owned or operated through Catholic organizations. And how that definitely is not a very, it's a very sobering topic. Okay. And so, again, Cathy here. If you're new, like and subscribe. And so, usually I'm talking about wellness, okay, but on the occasion, okay, I do talk about specific matters very much in the now that matter. And so I attended a webinar a few days ago, and it was, in fact, put on by or hosted by Catholics for Choice. It's a wonderful organization. I am a recovering Catholic. Who are my recovering Catholics? And so I am definitely a fond volunteer for them. And so I got to experience this new webinar on the state of affairs when it comes to how many actual hospitals, okay, medical centers, so forth, are actually owned and or at least directed um, regarding their leadership rules and so forth and so on how they then, deal with patients. Can be, in fact, ruled by Catholic doctrine. Okay, so I'm going to share with you, okay, my screen. I don't need to share my face, so to speak. But what you should see is my the website to Catholics for Choice, and you'll see here it says the doctrine will see you now. And it's a wonderful starter kit. Okay, it's a guide to Catholic healthcare. And why does this matter? Well, I'll show you actually one of the PDFs that we received, but this should tell you something. So, this statistic alone should actually frighten everyone. So, in the US, 1 in 6 hospital beds is Catholic owned or affiliated. Okay, so that means that if your lifestyle is not such that you are aligned with the Catholic doctrine, you might not like how you're treated when it comes to reproductive services or healthcare. And it's pathetic, quite honestly, because 200 plus, it's less than 300 bishops in the US are quite dogmatic on how they frame the doctrine of Catholicism to healthcare. And so scary that basically what you're reading here, right, is that if someone unknowingly, okay, let's say that for some reason, they chose, which a lot of people do, a lot of people want to maybe be in a home setting, but a lot of people still choose to have babies, okay, their children, give birth at hospitals. And what they might not realize, unless they dig deep into it, is that a lot of those hospitals, okay, follow Catholic doctrine. This means that because of less than 300 mostly white men who don't feel like they have any reason to, um, uh, at all care what happens to women's bodies, um, that the bishops prohibit healthcare services, including, okay, contraception, vasectomies, tubal ligations, end-of-life care, and gender-affirming care. So, how do you know if your hospital or your medical center is part of a Catholic affiliated organization? Well, you could take this quiz. It's really cool. Um, but it's pathetic to think that right now, okay, especially when science is being bombarded, that the Catholic doctrine would rather have go back to the medieval times, okay, than actually use science to help, again, help bring about, okay, the declining, it's interesting, right? Because, you know, humans are facing what we could consider a possible, slowing down, right, of the birth rate. After how many years, how many millennia of destroying the earth, and because we are at risk, right? Even though we've put multiple other species at risk and extinction, by the way, now that we're facing our own decline, it's interesting that even still, The Catholic Church is thinking that it's wiser to take away reproductive health care from those who require it to actually help the burden birth rate. But we digress. So anyway, Catholics for Choice again had this wonderful webinar, and I want to share it with you. Not the whole webinar, but definitely this resource. So in particular, okay, the type of care that is banned at Catholic hospitals, meaning that you may not have known, okay, that the hospital was affiliated in some way, shape or form to the Catholic, to what you would consider the Catholic dogma. But there are ethical and religious directives, okay? And so you got to be careful, right? This is really scary, honestly. But the directives, okay, I did want to go through this, and then I'm just going to show you the PDF. But the directives to really restrict or outright prohibit the following. I wanted to make sure you saw this. And again, this is on the website for Catholics for Choice. Again, abortion in all cases. Right, you read that right. To include life-threatening pregnancies that could end, again, not just a pregnancy, but possibly the actual mother's life. Okay. Contraception. Okay. Let's face it. When you, let's say, had the fun, and I air quote fun, when you've had the experience of a C-section, you're already quite, um, ready to probably be done with the whole birthing experience. And you're like, okay, go ahead, you're in there already. Let's go ahead and tie those tubes. And then to be told, no, sorry, no, no, no. We've just given you a major surgery, i.e., a C-section, but we can't touch your tubes so that you don't have to go through this again, possibly. Yeah, no, that's what it's like. They will not give emergency contraception to someone who has been sexually assaulted. Isn't that lovely? That is so like Jesus to downtrodden the victim, even worse, right? They will not, by any means, technically allow you to use in vitro fertilization or other assisted reproductive technologies. They will also not aid in dying care for people making end of life decisions. And gender affirming care is a no-no in any kind. So these are, in fact, what you would come up against if, in fact, you ended up in a hospital that, again, adheres to the ethical and religious directives for Catholic healthcare. And again, so basically a third of all hospitals in the US are owned or affiliated with the Catholic Church. Now, what I want to do is show you the PDF that I got from the webinar. And again, you will probably find this, okay, if you were to dig deeper into what I just saw, the website, Catholics for Choice, and then check out, because I do believe they'll be they will have, again, the webinar. But this was an interesting PDF that we got. Okay, so this is fun to hear about, and this is through Advancing New Standards in Reproductive Healthcare. And this is taken again, this was put together back in 2021, so kind of old, but nonetheless, very much. In fact, this was before the fall of Roe. So these numbers, keep an eye on the fact that this was before we were denied all of our bodily autonomy. So I love this graphic right here. And when should hospitals be able to restrict care based on religion? Okay, now remember, I just said a third of all US hospitals now are affiliated with the Catholic Church in some way, shape, or form, whether owned or affiliated with, and they have to follow those ethical standards that the Catholic Church holds. So, under which conditions, okay, do they believe that this is okay? So this was, I believe, all women, if I'm not mistaken. Under which conditions? No taxpayer. Okay, when should hospitals be able to restrict care based on religion? 52% said never. Yeah. So no taxpayer funds are used to support the hospital. Patients are informed of hospital's religious restrictions before visit. This is what they want, okay? I mean, this is what should happen, is what I'm getting at. Okay, because 52% of people do not believe restrictions should ever be the case, right? At any hospital. Um, no taxpayer funds are used to support the hospital. That's a given. That should, in other words, if you're going to be expected to go to a hospital that has these restrictions, okay, then they best not have this type of info or these, they should be aware that no taxpayer funds are used to support the hospital. That's important. Patients are informed of the hospital's religious restrictions before the visit. Okay, so of these 52% who said, when should hospitals be able to restrict care? Try never, which is the right answer. Then when, okay, should these fall into, when should be okay? Only 17% said always. All right. So meaning 17% said that it's not necessary to let a patient know ahead of time before they visit that the hospital restricts reproductive health care. 17% of the whole population, okay, uh, shouldn't be told when they arrive at the hospital what and what cannot be done there. Patients arriving by ambulance, unconscious, or in an emergency situation are offered transfer to the hospital. So 17% said, oh, yeah, no, just let them go into the hospital. They don't need to worry about, the restrictions with regards to reproductive health care, even if the reason why the person's going to the hospital is for that exact reason. Okay. Um, Too many people are unaware of how this has happened. And that a third, that is a lot of freaking hospitals, okay? Um, it is so disturbing. And here's my point. More than 2/3 of women find it unacceptable for hospitals to restrict information and treatment options for miscarriage because of religion. It is sickening what happens in these and in some events you can't blame the medical team, okay? A lot of these medical professionals, they're up against a wall because they want to practice, but because there are so now few, again, secular medical clinics, right? Or hospitals, let's say, they have to go where they can. It's funny, we have a shortage of medical professionals, but yet it is so darn hard, okay, based on the demographics and geographics of the whole medical establishment to actually find a secular and non, you know, one hospital that can help you with all your residency, right? In some cases, you have to, take it where you can get it, right? So please understand that it's not like the medical professionals, all of them are okay with what the Catholic doctrine is. It's just that they don't really have much of a choice as to where they take their residency or where they can find a job. Now, it's interesting, right? Because again, RNs, like they're like gold right now. Like there are not enough RNs in the US. There are not enough, hell, there's not enough doctors of any type. Okay. We are in a medical professional shortage. It's critical and it's getting worse because brain drain is happening because of the fascist regime now. So my point here is to get educated. And these are the key points. And I'll leave it at that. There's 4 of them here. Most women believe that hospitals should not, like I said earlier, not be able to restrict access to reproductive health care based on religion, and that is unacceptable for hospitals to restrict reproductive health care because of religion. Second, many women were not able to identify the religious affiliation of the hospital when seeking reproductive care. This is what pisses me off the most. It is by design that these institutions, i.e., the Catholic doctrine, okay, they're not making it obvious that the affiliation is there, okay? It's not obvious, okay? And when you're trying to pick, a professional healthcare um, let's say a new PCP, you're more worried about what that person's experience is, okay, right? Like how many years of experience do they have? Which schools did they go to? You're looking at their credentials. You're not worried about what their religion is. You're worried about, can they save my life? Do they have the experience? But yet, nowhere, okay, when someone is looking, right, at a um, patient portal, are they told, oh, this hospital, by the way, it's owned by the Catholic Church. Nowhere does it say that. And that is wrong. So, again, many women were not able to identify the religious affiliation of their hospital when seeking reproductive care. Third, when choosing a hospital for reproductive care, some women believe the hospital's religious affiliation is important among other reasons, but less than 1% of women believe that religion is the most important consideration. So for even even the 17% that said, oh, it should always be an issue, even then it was less than 1%, okay, of saying that the religious affiliation of the actual hospital doesn't matter. And then finally, the majority of women expect to be able to receive reproductive services regardless of the religion of the hospital. Read that one more time. The majority of women expect to be able to receive reproductive services of the religion of the hospital. I'm sorry, regardless of the religion of the hospital. So, right, you hear of, the hospitals that are, named Mount Sinai. Obviously, that's not that's not Catholic. I would presume, right, that it's a Jewish affiliated hospital. But that doesn't mean, right, that someone who's not of the Jewish faith, they would not they would expect to have overall care regardless of what or who owns that church, right? Again, the majority of women expect to be able to receive reproductive services regardless of the religion of the hospital. So I bring that to your attention again because we have to understand what we're up against. It is heinous, and I mean it is heinous to think that when you are in an emergency situation for any reason, right, that you might have to worry about what the ER doctors are going to do or not do based on the fact of the background of that church, of that again, that hospital's affiliation. Um, I think that the worst part of this is that these hospitals are not for profit or nonprofit, right? And so they get tax dollars. And that should not be the case if they're going to refuse any type of health care, to include all forms of reproductive health care. So I want you to be aware. I want you to really start to question, okay, where your health care is coming from, because it really does matter as to how much autonomy we actually experience when we go to any of these hospitals or to any of these clinics. It does no good to have health insurance at a location that does not even consider you able to have bodily autonomy. So this is a big issue, and it's one where, if I had any amount of wealth, I would go at it like gangbusters to make sure that all taxpayer money is completely gone from any Catholic organized medical facility. And let's be very, very clear here. Again, I'm a recovering Catholic, all right? The history of Catholicism is very colored, as we all know, or maybe you don't know, but if you're like me, you know, but you were given a whitewash version. Now, since 2020, and even before that, actually, even as a college person, I was very, very aware of the hypocrisy that is the Catholic religion. But what I'm getting at is when you start actually digging into why, okay, Christians created the first hospital somewhere, or created, the first homeless shelters, or created, or, the social justice part of the religion, it wasn't as sweet and thought-provoking as anyone would like to believe in the Catholic realm. It was because of conquest. It was because of indoctrination. It was because of keep going, right? On all the isms, Christianity is right there. Now, do I still have a sense of being Catholic? You know what? I have a very true belief. I guess you can almost say I'm a recovering Catholic and agnostic. Agnostic? I forget which one it is. I believe in a higher power. I do believe in actually God. I pray every day and I believe it has significance. But do I believe and have I ever truly believed in the fact that if I had wanted to look into theology and get into the priesthood, did I think it was fair that I couldn't? Hell no. I never thought that was okay. A lot, ever since I was little, I had questions about why the religion was the way it was. And it never sat well with me that women were never given any type of power. Okay. Nor did I ever want to be a nun. I'm like, well, if I'm going to be a nun, why not just be a priest? They get to do more stuff. Hello. So to that effect, you can counter as much as you want that Christians have done so much good in the world. But Jesus never said to demand, to force, to deny other people's humanity in the name of Christianity. No. Jesus simply gave the commandment, love thy neighbor. Not by force, not by corrosion, coercion, thank you. And especially not through manipulation and denying someone else's rights. So please, please, please be aware again, 1/3 of all US hospitals are in fact owned or affiliated with the Catholic Church. And there are specific guidelines of ethics that must be followed, whether the medical staff want it like that or not, that must be adhered to. So do your homework and then think about, again, you don't have to be Catholic to be part of Catholics for Choice, but if you're in the reproductive part years of your life, and even if you're not, it's a really interesting way to get a better understanding of reproductive freedom and why it's so important in every aspect of life. And the Catholics for Choice is a wonderful organization that can help guide you through that. All right. So until our next extra, take care, take charge, God bless, and see you soon.